Welcome to my documentary on UFOs and how they can affect the world in major ways, and the investigation into the government secrecy that surrounds this topic. The UFO and extraterrestrial phenomenon is very real and should be taken seriously and should be scientifically researched. In this documentary, I am going to expose the malicious attempts from our government to keep us under control. The main sources used in this documentary come from a couple of credible groups known as the Disclosure Project and the Open Minds Program. These sources used testimonies of ex-government officials who witnessed and provided substantial amounts of proof and documents about what is really going on behind closed doors. I believe the American people are entitled to a more thorough explanation than has been given by the Air Force. I think we owe it to the people to establish credibility regarding UFOs and to produce the greatest possible enlightenment of this subject. Former President of the United States, Gerald Ford. The overarching question for this documentary is, how will the confirmation of alien existence and the declassification from the government affect our way of life and future? Most people do not understand that the declassification of extraterrestrials and their technologies will affect every single person on Earth. How would this affect everyone? According to Dr. Stephen Greer, head of the Disclosure Project, if the government were to release even some of the technologies they have access to, we could start to end globally divided problems, such as the tension over energy sources between countries and poverty as we know it. Imagine a world with free energy sources, meaning globally available power for homes and vehicles, as well as the production of all kinds of goods on Earth, no longer costing nearly as much to produce, package, and ship. A world that did not have pollution or corporations attempting to monopolize every little piece of our lives. A world where worldwide and space-wide travel would be regular activity for everyone. It would be the start of the next industrial revolution, and could very easily be obtained if all of this was not kept a secret. In fact, we could have started this process back in the 1950s, but the government wants to keep the public under a monopoly by businesses and our current needs. Humanity has lost 100 years of evolution due to this. In my government secrecy section of the Lit Review, I wanted to explore the secrecy surrounding this topic and why it has been kept secret for this many years. In my findings, I found that the Unacknowledged Special Access Programs, or USAPs for short, are unacknowledged operations based on extraterrestrial crafts and technology that the government has been conducting in secret for about 100 years without public knowledge. These operations are conducted by the small amount of government officials who are in one of the 11 clearance levels above the President of the United States. To anyone else outside these programs, these projects are designed to be completely unacknowledged and denied to the public and government officials below the clearance level. This is extremely illegal. Dr. Greer and many of the ex-government officials interviewed on camera clearly state that these hidden technologies in these programs could push us through the Industrial Revolution and completely reshape the world as we know it. Dr. Greer reports, quote, "If the average person knew that the term UFO was actually concocted after they knew that they were extraterrestrial vehicles or man-made anti-gravity devices, they would realize that for 60 years we've already had the solution to the environmental crisis, the energy crisis, and global poverty." So, how do we know that these operations are even happening since they are designed to keep us in the dark? Well, there are many whistleblowers who have worked on these operations in the past and later came forward with this information. Many of them openly testified with Dr. Greer's documentary Unacknowledged. These ex-government officials exposed the deep secrecy taking place in the black programs behind the majority of the world's back. For my Unacknowledged Special Access Program section of the Lit Review, I dove deeper into the specific group of operations and how they could possibly fund all these projects that would cost an immense amount of money. On September 10, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense himself, told the public that the Pentagon is not accounting or tracking $2.3 trillion back in 2001. And since then, nothing has been done to track the money that goes missing every single year. If this money cannot be tracked, how could we possibly know that the government is spending tax dollars the way they say they are? We can't. But we can listen to the people who have been in these operations themselves. In their words, a colossal $100 million is being spent on black projects, special access programs, intelligence gathering, and weapon development that are beyond congressional oversight, or any oversight for that matter. There is no evidence to support that they are working to balance the amount of missing money from the Pentagon's budget, considering the amount missing just continues going up every year. Michael Schratt, head of the Open Minds program, points out that in the past the budget received the extra funding needed by making up ridiculous amounts of funding they need for common items. Quote, such abuses have led to the infamous account of $700 coffee pots and $600 screws. How they are currently getting the funding for the kind of tech is by lying about how much normal publicized aircrafts cost, such as the B-2 stealth bomber, which, when adding up all the things required to build one, does not add up to the enormous cost of $2.5 billion apiece. In my technological advancements section of the Lit Review, I found that these whistleblowers have also come forward with substantial evidence of what exactly the technologies they have discovered from recovered extraterrestrial crafts are. Dr. Greer and Michael Schratt have detailed many testimonies and even retrieved classified documents that go in depth on what these technologies are and how they work. Whistleblowers in the unacknowledged documentary by Dr. Greer repeatedly state that the government has been using back-engineered extraterrestrial crafts to create many different types of technology since the famous Roswell, New Mexico event in 1947, where a UFO crash-landed and was reported on by local news before they covered it up. The crafts and bodies were quickly recovered and sent to Area 51 to be studied and then sent off to Los Alamos. Using that craft, they created electrogravitic propulsion systems, which, according to Michael Schratt, are used in the B-2 stealth bomber, little to the public's knowledge. This is why the stealth bomber is able to, quote, eliminate drag by more than an incredible 60%, but can travel at great speeds on a gravity wave without conventional propulsion. In a nutshell, what this system does is to produce a gravity well or gravity gradient in front of the craft, resulting in very high velocities. Schratt is also quoted in detailing another kind of craft used by the military called an ARV, or an alien reproduction vehicle, which are the man-made recreation of crashed extraterrestrial vehicles. To power these crafts, they use an energy source that taps into the ambient zero-point energy fields for propulsion. These crafts can hover off the floor and travel across 12 miles of airspace in under a second and a half. Perhaps the most important piece of technology recovered from one of these extraterrestrial crafts was reported by Richard Doty, who was a special agent for the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations, who was stationed in New Mexico at the time. Doty was interviewed by Dr. Greer in the unacknowledged documentary and is extremely credible. He details in the documentary about a small rectangular piece of what looked like plexiglass. Quote, it took them years after the recovery of the craft to understand that the piece of glass was actually the energy source of the ship that was recovered. They discovered that the glass could power, quote, something as small as a watch up to a city. The power given out by the device was determined by the demand. This means the device output any amount of power required of it. There is virtually no limit compared to the low tech that humanity relies on day after day and could single-handedly change the world. I examined more than 10 sources from Google, Google Scholar, YouTube, and Netflix that analyze different aspects of the UFO phenomenon objectively. I also filled a gap in this study by completing my own field research to help me get a better understanding of the population's view on such a topic. I designed my field research to help find out if the point that people would not believe witness testimonies about seeing UFOs was factual. Brought up by Dr. Greer, and how much the public trusts the government. I conducted an experiment using a Google survey taken by 31 people. The age range for this was 16 and 17 years old, all the way to 50 to 60-year-olds. I found that the point made by Dr. Greer is valid because 71% of people said they believed in aliens, but in my other question, only 41% would actually believe someone if they told them they saw a UFO. It is a strange thing to consider that most, if not all, witness testimonies are taken seriously in court, but when it comes to something like extraterrestrials, an idea that the culture has not embraced yet, no one believes them, or they think that they're insane due to a constant media portrayal and psychological warfare from the government to keep it as seeming like such a bizarre topic. Only 10% of the people who took the survey said they didn't believe in alien life at all, which is a smaller percentage than what I originally expected. This means that the government, despite all of their attempts, have not convinced many people that extraterrestrials are fiction. There were some holes in my research because some people who took the survey did not take it seriously by answering with clearly satirical answers. But this is expected with the topic of aliens because of the culturalization of the phenomenon, and helps prove even further that the subject is not taken seriously at first glance in society. All of this points to the fact that a good amount of the public is still treating the situation as laughable and inconceivable because of their lack of knowledge on the topic and their doubt the government could keep this secret for so long. Overall, my questions help me understand what the public's view of the extraterrestrial topic is. I used my findings in my lit review on government secrecy and different technologies to mold my questions in a way that helped me find out where people draw the lines between real and non-believable. One big limitation to my investigation of this topic was that most of the interesting information is classified by the government. I am working off the fragments of information that the small group of the public retrieve from the government personnel and have to make sure the information is credible. Roughly 90% of the information out there is deserving of the skepticism it receives, but being a skeptic does not mean disregarding all information from the topic because some of it is misleading. Finding the programs that are dedicated to making every detail of the cover-up public information is what really helped me form this paper and documentary into what it needs to be to fully review this topic. In conclusion, this study helped illuminate the thoughts of the community and their beliefs towards extraterrestrials and expose the deep dark secrecy of our government's flawed system to keep this under wraps. Most people do believe aliens exist, but don't believe other people see them here on Earth. This shows that people are not ready to hear what the truth really is about the universe and would rather continue being a divided species. If declassification were to happen now, it would throw off our existing culture, religion, and technology and expose us to a whole new generation of technology that seems decades away. Most of humanity is not ready for such a culture shock, that they would rather stick to what is comfortable than go through change. However, even though the rest of the world will think the next industrial revolution is pushing us towards the future at a rate humanity has never seen, the ones who are educated on this subject will know that we are making up for decades of lost time. No matter how futuristic things get, we will always be living in the past because of the decades of illegal government secrecy that stunted humanity's growth, whether the public likes it or not. Change is inevitable, and we will reach these goals one day in the future and make the next step for mankind, with or without the help from the government. Some directions the future of disclosure process should start to take are educating the masses of people in this major corruption and the world-changing knowledge that has been illegally hidden from the public. Once more people are educated on this, then the community must take to activism and demand disclosure from the likes of the CIA and Air Force, until humanity finally begins the steps needed to be taken to reshape this world for the better. The UFO community must learn how to get the majority of the public on board before taking to activism, or we will continue to live in the past and waste citizens' lives who are working every day in an already dead system. The sooner the public begins to push the declassification process, the more and more extremely positive changes we will start to see in the world. That is why aliens should be important to society. Thank you.